Good, great. I'm happy this works. So let's start by introducing you. So I told our audience that you're Countdown 2030. Can you introduce yourselves as speakers and then maybe the group as such?
Okay. So my name is Jakob Schneider. I'm from Lenzburg, and I'm working here in the office Salatier Architekten Basel, and I'm as well part of the Countdown 2030.
Okay.
I am Claudio Meletta. I also work here in Basel in an office called Stereo Architektur, which I own with my partners, and also part of Countdown 2030.
Yeah, and my name is Friederike Kluge. I'm also part of Countdown 2030, of course, and I'm at Alma Mater Architects in Basel. I have my office and work in University of Constance. Yeah. And
so what
here today?
Okay, so maybe you can explain a bit what drove you to form a group, because the architects that we spoke with so far in this series were usually just architects for their own office, and they would speak for themselves as an office. You started something, a groupment of different architects. Can you tell us why and what this is?
Yeah.
So maybe I start because one of the starting points was a little bit Rike's, so I can talk about it. So SAM, your institution has this Vorgestellt, which is a talk of young officers that every year 3 young officers of Basel get the chance to introduce themselves. And actually the starting point of our group comes back to that talk when Alma Mater was invited to do it, and they used a part of their time to question how to continue with architecture in times of climate crisis. And after that talk, we had several discussions. There was also a group of students of Rike in Basel, and they also went to visit some offices, and we just, maybe 10 or 15 of us had this feeling that we have to start something to raise the awareness of the importance of the architecture within climate change, or do something against the climate crisis, or help out. And so we started this Countdown 2030, about 15 of us, where we meet from time to time and try to actually, it's an organization that wants to implement this kind of thinking of building more ecological into architecture in Basel, in Switzerland, and everywhere.
And I think what was really interesting was that we actually, lots of us, we didn't know each other. We just found out that we have the same aim to change, or not to change things, but to think about what we have to do now as architects. Because what we found out that we are grew up knowing absolutely, to know clearly what sustainability is, and privately we always thought a lot about it, what we could change. And we found out as architects that actually we don't really build environmental friendly, but it's a big part of the climate change is the construction, with 40% of the CO2 emissions. And we thought, okay, we know very little about it, so let's find out together as a group. And this I found is really special, because we really are partners in crime. We really want to do things together, and so there are lots of different people coming from every side, and our group is always growing. And yeah, so we started to take on lots of projects, getting closer to this topic.
Okay. By the way, Friederike is audible quite well. The voice can speak a bit up, because you're a little bit away from the camera. Okay. Yeah. So, what do you think architects can actually do? Because I mean, you could also say the best form of environmental friendly architecture would be not to build, right? So if you build, you or is there a way of building where you don't get your hands dirty with respect to the environment?
Yes.
Probably, yes.
Probably yes. I think one point is that we really should, first of all, we should really take care about the existing structures in general. So we really have to carefully unterhalten, sustain the existing buildings and the existing infrastructure to maintain those, and not to be pressured to build new buildings in general. So that's maybe one part, and building new buildings might be possible soon when we act as a when we understand building as a Baukultur. So there is not only the architect involved to achieve this goal. No, it's a task for everybody involved in building buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And we just, I mean, it's probably hard to now build a building from scratch with zero emissions. It's probably not even possible within the structures right now, but we see us as a group to promote, to build, we call Countdown 2030 because we want to try to aim at a Baukultur, or at the building infrastructure within Switzerland until 2030, which could be emission-free. And we are trying to, as architects, build with as little emissions as possible, and also to change the whole way we think about building. And you know, there have to be laws that follow, and a lot of parameters would have to change still until it is actually possible to build more or less emission-free. We just say that we have to start now. We have to do it quickly, and we have to do as much as possible at the moment.
How do you think you are more efficient in doing that? By working as an architect, or by becoming a politician that could actually strongly lobby for changing laws?
Yeah.
We actually always discuss about it, because we find out, we always talking about the biggest measures. So what we would like to know, what is the fact, what are the measures with the biggest effect, the fastest effect? And you come to politics really soon. And I think it is a very big measure, or has a big effect. And actually we also are starting to get involved in politics. But still, we also feel a lot as architects. Actually, we want to build. We studied this really nice profession to build, and now actually we hear the voices of experts that say actually we couldn't build, or we can't build anymore. So what can we do? And I think for the beginning, for us, it's natural that we want to try out how we can find ways to build eco-friendly, and also biodiversity friendly, because this is even the bigger problem we have right now, and we totally don't know what to do. So I think this is maybe the first aim, not to lose creativity about this topic.
Yeah, and I think you kind of need the pressure from the street. You know, the easiest way to build sustainably would be if the politicians now would say, or if they said, we have a law that actually calculates the CO2 emissions costs, and then you actually pay for them. And if you did that, I think very quickly we wouldn't build in, for example, concrete anymore, but doesn't have to be concrete because it's just too expensive. But it's not going to change that easily on a political way either. So I think there needs to be, like, it goes hand in hand. There needs to be the architects that are changing. There needs to be architects that are talking to clients with money who can maybe change a little bit their mindset. And then it goes hand in hand with political measures. And Countdown 2030 aims firstly to architects and people involved with building, but it very quickly becomes, of course, political. And we also have contacts with politicians already. So.
But what is interesting is we also talked about it, how much time does it need to give a law or make a law, and this is a lot of time. And we are our name is Countdown 2030 because we are totally convinced we have to react now. That time to act is really getting smaller and less time. So the way around the politics would be really a long way. But we as architects, if we really start talking together, what can we do right now? What are the measures? Then we can be very more quick. And I think, yeah, we have to start this process as professionals to really change fastly something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's obviously, you know, in the way we talk about architecture, in the architectural critique, the sustainability has become more important over the years, but it's just not important enough yet. We still have buildings that are being getting stars for excellency, but are not environmental friendly at all, for example. And it just needs this additional layer of the eco-friendly or fair and sustainable architecture for architecture to be good now. And so also it's not only as architects, but also architecture critiques and the whole branch, everyone who's involved in architecture, actually.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if I understand correctly, what you're doing in the moment is to set up a catalog of things that architects can do right away, act differently, in order to have a less damaging impact on the environment when they build. Is the target group of your group basically other colleagues, architects, that you want to convince to be smarter in the way they build? Or do you have a larger, do you preach beyond that?
You know, the problem is that even within our colleagues, there is not enough awareness of how important the topic is and how little is being done. And you have to start somewhere. So we said we want to raise this awareness as quickly as possible with other architects. And then, of course, we want to raise also the awareness in a bigger sense. But we have to start with architects, because if I talk to my colleagues, this topic is just not important enough yet.
Mm-hmm. So what's the feedback so far? Because you started this 1st of January, by applying this countdown LED display to the Swiss Architecture Museum, displaying the time that's left until 2030, which, according to some experts, is basically our deadline for doing something good for the environment. If we still wanted to have an effect, whatever good we do after that, according to their statement, is not really impacting the course of events in a dramatic way. So since we're in August now, so it's 8 months into the year, how do you see the effects of your initiative so far?
Well, I think we have there somewhere where a shifting of values, and that's something I see in my surrounding when I speak with people as well, not architects. There's a shift of values concerning that they're getting more aware about this problem of the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. And I think as soon as we start having other values and we set the climate higher, we have more possibilities to really change as well the way we build houses and the way we think about architecture. So, and one main thing, what is really surprising for me, that I really found out that in architecture we always speak as well about security on different levels, like earthquakes, thefts, security in all possible shapes and forms. And when we see at the goals the international community at the UN set with 2050 as net zero, it has a 60% security that we don't reach 2 degrees or higher. So when we discuss about these goals and we see how less security there is calculated in these goals, it's really for me breathtaking to see how we act with this topic. So.
So you're saying we're very careful with security when it comes to handicapped people, to guardrails and other kinds of personal handicaps, but we're very sloppy with regard to the security of the survival of our planet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe to come back to your question of how I see how we see the initiative at the moment. It's funny because we started this wanting to make a couple of days in Basel in May where we would have like this actions planned with to raise the awareness and everything, and then Corona came in and it kind of broke us down a little bit and we slowed down a little bit in public. But in the same time, we had a lot of interactions, a lot of people coming to us and trying to interact with us and asking us about what we're doing. And so we actually have a little bit made the experience that a lot of groups out there have been waiting for action to be taken. For example, the BSA or the SCA or everyone was quite happy to talk with us and to discuss these questions with us. And somehow we think we're not the only ones thinking about this, of course, and there's a lot also being done in this way, but it's kind of undercover still. And we have now noticed that the interest in our group is quite big, even though we didn't have a lot of public time so far because of Corona. And that is kind of something we hope for. That, yeah.
And one of our main ideas when we founded our group 1 year ago was that you just mentioned it, that we wanted to make like a checklist for offices to say, okay, if you do this, this, that, and that, then you will build greener or better, more future-proof. Actually, what now Hope Pater also did, which is really great. Who hasn't read that? I think it's really helpful. And we also, what we found out is that we, as architects, that really want to consider well the design, we actually never had the time to get the education of how now to build. And our aim now was to talk to the experts, to the scientists, read all different architects, listen to lectures, and then we try to take the essence of all the lectures out and transport it to the architect. So we would work as kind of a filter, because we see lots of people are aware, but they still don't know what to do. So somebody has to do this work. Actually, the scientists have done it. We are just too maybe lazy to read all the articles, and this is a problem. So it's a kind of way to translate what they told us since a lot of years. And I mean, it goes back to the 70s, and we are still in architecture not really listening. Somehow the professional discourse still is not so essential as is the discourse around us about this topic. And we truly think that if we know the rules of how to build, then we can really do good architectural concepts. We see there's a lot of possibilities to, with lots of passion and delight, do ecological architecture. And this means not really use more techniques, but architectonic concepts that are future-proofed architecture.
And you know, we think it's actually a chance for the architecture, and somehow it should be something to be fond of, or something to want to work on, because so far in the last, I don't know, 20 years or so, at least personally, I think there has been a bit of a lack of content in a lot of architecture that's being built. It's a lot of copying, pasting, a lot of copying history, and not really having, for the time now, that content. And this is a huge problem coming towards us with this climate crisis. But in the same sense, for architects, it could also be quite an opportunity to make something new out of this, or to implement this as content into the architecture that we're doing. And that's also what we're trying with our offices, and to address this topic as if, as new content, kind of content giving for architecture.
Yeah, we can say thank you that we live in this really bad time. There are so many things that have to be changed, and we can do a lot because architects have a role position right now. Great, Ray, let's use this and make yeah, new ideas. And I think this is maybe what keeps us going, that we are really thinking there's lots of things waiting for us to discover.
Why is it then that most architects, or many architects, still maybe also more established architects, consider the necessities to rethink building in the light of the climate change as a barrier, as a hindrance, as a limitation? Why is it that many people have a hard time to see this as a challenge that is interesting and that can bring architecture forward? So, I mean,
difficult question, but it could be that in the last years it was often technically treated, like sustainability was often a way, you know, with Minergie and all these labels and everything that's been invented. It was often a very technical kind of thing, something that you also had to treat, but which wasn't really in the interest of the architect. And that shift hasn't happened yet, that architects would actually consider like a concept of a building environmental friendly. So far, somehow it's always an additional aspect which is often technically treated, and I think a lot of architects don't want more rules because they think there's enough rules, being, you know, with isolation or handrails or whatever, and maybe it's a fear of having more rules because it's still thought of very technically.
I think it's interesting that, you know, it's not that long ago that somebody said less is more, and you know, took delight in reducing things, reducing parameters, making things simpler or look simpler. In the meantime, we've had a paradigm change that said more is more, right, coolers, or even big yes is more, basically saying yes to everything that is coming towards you. So if some developer says, yeah, do me this type of high rise, and you say yes because it's apparently more. It seems that there was a time, or let's say even during the longest period of time of architectural history, the impossibility to do everything that you could imagine doing was a motivation to do something extraordinary. For instance, take the architects of the monks, like Cistercians, for instance, who forbid themselves to use ornaments for religious reasons. And who, for instance, in the case of the monastery in Korea in Germany, built an entire church with Gothic kind of, with an abstraction of Gothic formwork, forms and ornaments, with only 14 different types of bricks that they pre-produced, and then did everything, rosettas, arches, with those 14 brick formats. So there seemed to be a kind of an adrenaline rush coming out of a challenge that you would impose on yourself. You would say, okay, I'm gonna make this as hard as possible for me, and it will reward me with this type of radical solution. Do you think it's possible that architects today could imagine again to get their kicks out of not doing whatever they could according to the means that are given to them by the market or the building industry, but could get their kicks out of saying, well, I'm trying to do the one thing that is right, or something that is right, even if it's 10 times harder to do it? Do you think there's a possibility to seduce both architects, but also the building industry, with a paradigm change towards sufficiency, away from efficiency towards sufficiency, which is apparently, according to what scientists say, the thing that we need to do? Can you make the less more sexy than the more?
Very important that this happens. So we have to believe in it.
But yes, we know that we know that we have to do a lot of things, but still we don't do them, right? So the critical question is always, how do you get yourself to do something you know you should be doing, but that your routine says, no, I've done this always different, and it's kind of difficult to do it.
But
To switch.
I think it's more the reality that we do have a lot of, I'm searching for this word, it's Zwang, from
Obligation?
Constraints from everywhere, from lots of things. So I think we, in our generation, somehow we learned architecture or to build only with lots of these constraints. And I think we are not maybe the generation anymore that can imagine building on a green site. And maybe this is a difference from other years where you could just build and you didn't have to reflect so much those constraints. But I think building today means constraints, and somehow we have to get freedom out of it. And we as our office found out that sometimes these constraints really make the design. We try to take them, to be like the monks you just mentioned, and try to make a concept out of that.
You know, it's the building industry actually with the clients which are very important, because we can like 4 hours. You ask if we can get a kick out of that for ourselves, but it's never just ourselves. That might be the case if I build my own tree hut, but if I build a building or renovate a building for a client, it's always a lot of that energy goes into talking to the client and trying to convince them to not build a garage or to also wanting to build like we would like to build. And so it makes it a bit difficult to get the kick out of it, because in your office you have maybe that inspiration, but then this reality check comes very fast. And but we would like to get there, and that's why probably that's why we have these initiatives, because we want to raise this awareness within the whole building industry. And the clients are super important because they make up most of the rules so far, right?
Actually, we have to try to set up this demand for this kind of architecture. So we have to make the market for this kind of architecture as well. So we can't, or we only discuss it as a vision and we don't actually build, and then that's another possibility to show or to prove such concepts. Otherwise, you need a client.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's some days it will be the best architects will have has designed the smallest part. So the one who can design even really small things that make a big difference is the one who has done the best concept and who wins the competition. So really to make sufficient smallest possible designs.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we talk about the need to abstent yourself from doing some things that you think are not right, let's talk about things you wouldn't want to do now that maybe you didn't think about 10 years ago when you were studying or in your early years of your career. What are the things you think architects should try to stay away from with regard to conventional practice? Where are the moments where you would say no when somebody asks you something?
It's always, that's a very hard question, because you can either say no or you can try to make best of the situation, as in better you make 80% right than nothing at all. But of course there are these things which I didn't consider 10 years ago. For example, every new building that I see which is built with way more concrete, for example, than on a material level than necessary, I would say, why do you do that? I wouldn't do that anymore. I would try to, I don't know, construct in wood or other materials which are more environmental friendly. Let's say there's different new materials also. And so there's this, of course, there is a lot of things that you wouldn't do anymore. And for example, in a competition, you can easily leave them out. But when it comes to a client who wants something built, it's always difficult. of course, I mean, if there's something that you say, not even 20% of my ideals I can realize in this kind of project, then I don't do it. But if you think that you can realize 75 or 80% of the ideas that you have to build like environmental friendly, then maybe you do it still.
And I guess that most of the times we don't come to a project and we know already what kind of project we have in front of us. Mm-hmm. So most of the time we have a client with an idea and we shape together with him his ideas how to get there, and so there is a big space how to achieve or to influence these goals we are developing together with the clients, and that's a big chance as well.
So you think a strategy of the lesser evil is a good method to induce change, or do you think sometimes a clear boycott is necessary?
Well, it's a mean question, because a clear boycott needs a lot of people to help with it. And if the 20 people of us try to do that, we're not so sure if that works out well. You could also...
For us.
Yeah, but so maybe it's the lesser evil solution, you know, trying to convince as many people to build as environmental friendly as possible at the moment, with the constraints within the laws that we have and within just the circumstances.
And I think also we found out that sustainability and biodiversity is seldom a yes or no, it's always a discussion. So it's really hard to say this is right and this is wrong. You have to find out which is the right way, and while thinking about these topics, you will find new ways how you can construct a building. So I think maybe it's hard to say. There are things maybe where you say, no, I don't want to do it, and on other occasion it might be the only way to build in the moment. And I think we're still in this position that we have somehow to build because our profession, and maybe someday we will say, okay, we stop, we cannot do this anymore. Actually, we should say that, but I think we more try to find a good way how we can do this profession well.
The thing is, we are now so far off of what we should do that anything that's being built at the moment, pretty much anything, is if you were very consequent and you would say you have to be super eco-friendly, like also the way it should be, then it's that what you asked in the beginning, you know, you shouldn't build at all, and then we wouldn't have a profession anymore. And it probably we still need to build for humankind. People need to live and people need to have schools and everything. So not sure if that's the right way to just say we don't build anymore.
No, of course, but the question is not a boycott to build at all, but it's the question, for instance, not use certain materials unless you absolutely have no other choice. I mean, yeah. the elephant in the room being concrete, of course, because we're in Switzerland, where both the building industry is very much centered around this material, but also the aesthetic education of architects relies very much on concrete. And you have the impression that Swiss architects, whenever they build something, the first choice, the material of choice is concrete. And whenever they use wood or so, they almost feel they have to say sorry and explain why. So
I think it's the other way around now. Or actually, you're right, but in my head it's the other way around. If I build something in concrete, then I don't feel comfortable with it. And you know, if a client asks me to make a concrete facade, for example, that's a point where we would say in our office, no, we don't do that anymore. You know, that was nice, and we love concrete as a material, and it has had its place in history, but it's something we shouldn't do anymore, and we don't do it. So there are these points where we boycott, or where we would say you need to go to someone else, of course.
What are your experiences with clients when you say that?
Our experience, or maybe in our office at least, they never ask for it. The architects are the ones who say, that would be nice, we could do that. And of course it's such a nice material, but maybe we reduce it to the places where we really need it, where really in foundations or in structural elements. But like on the walls, it's difficult to use it right now without thinking about what you're doing as a damage.
And you know, I think architects often use the client also as an excuse. And you know, I make the experience with our private clients, for example, that they actually don't have an idea often how things should be. And that we actually make a proposal. And then if you never come up with a concrete facade, they don't ask for it. I mean, it might be a case 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 that someone wants that, but we haven't had that. Usually we could convince, we've built more or less everything in wood in the last 5 years, and we could convince the people quite easily. It wasn't really that hard.
I found out that clients often have the desire to build eco-friendly, because in society it's way more common to talk about it. And we as architects were somehow trained not to not to go this way. And now we're thinking, okay, I also have the aim to search for a way to build which is right now better for this planet. Yes, until we have found other ways to somehow reserve the planet. And concrete, as it has 7 to 9% of CO2 emissions worldwide, is a big part. And scientists tell us that maybe we shouldn't use it, we shouldn't use it anymore because it has to be used in other countries where there's lack of infrastructure, for example. Here, everything is built. So maybe we also have to discover other materials, which is nice.
And to come back to state that, I think it's really true that we make the experience that often the architects are the problem and not the environment.
Interesting.
Yes.
I mean, halfway into this year, or let's say a couple of months after you started your initiative in January, and you mentioned that you had a whole set of programs and actions devised that you wanted to start to communicate about this project. Corona struck. Would you say that the Corona crisis has limited or was a burden to your attempt to raise awareness about the necessity of building environmentally friendly, or has it actually boosted your agenda? Has it made the problem more acute in the awareness of the society?
I think that people now understand what a crisis is. And I mean, we grew up thinking we don't even know what a crisis is. And I think this was really clear this means to our society. And all of a sudden we were confronted with measures from politics or behaviors that we had to respect, but we were always reacting. And I think the big difference, or what we saw, is that right now we still can shape the future. We still have the time to shape this crisis, to hopefully not make it too worse. I mean, climate change is already happening, but I think now it showed us that it's really important what we do. And I think this even made it clear that it's possible to now, if you have the time, to shape and design the future, and we want really much to do this instead of reacting, or then we don't have any possibilities anymore to create.
I think it actually struck not in such a bad moment for our cause or for the climate cause, because somehow I think before Corona came, there was the awareness for the climate crisis was much higher than maybe 6 months before. A lot of strikes being held, a lot of organizations starting to talk more about it, and somehow it came up, and then of course it gave a little break with Corona. But in the same time, Corona showed us that we are actually able to react as a society, and that people get used to new things quite easily and quite quickly sometimes. And that is kind of something that gives us hope to say we could also change how we live and how we are with architecture, but also in our life towards this climate crisis. And I think once this Corona crisis maybe over with a vaccine, or maybe just like fading out, or we learn to live with it, and we can demonstrate again and everything happens again as before. My personal view is that I think that all these strikes and everything for climate will come back probably even bigger than it was before, because we realize that Corona is just one part of a bigger crisis kind of thing. You know, we have these different things that threat us. You know, you have the viruses, but you also have the climate, and you notice that these things are linked and that they come together. And so, in the sense of having more awareness in a society, maybe this coronavirus wasn't such a bad thing, or to say it came at if it has to happen, it didn't come in such a bad moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also we have connections now to different cities, and in the beginning it started everything in Basel, but then somehow we are now connected to lots of different people. We meet scientists in other countries, and it makes really easy the communication, and also to ask, how are you dealing with this crisis? For example, we started this Architects Declare in Switzerland, and there's actually a huge networks of architects that are subscribing the idea that they want to build biodiversity and eco-friendly. And it was interesting, for example, to talk in a big conference we had worldwide with the Australian architects that said that there were some incidents in the forests that we have heard about in the press. And actually this led to lots of people subscribing that they really wanted to change something. And they said, okay, maybe we are the first architects here that I experience real product of the climate changes. And there are really lots of changes now going on over there, because I think this is the problem, that here maybe we don't experience the results of the climate change yet.
Mm-hmm.
And biodiversity change.
This series of interviews here has been a lot about the possible inspirations one can draw from Corona for a project, for a general project of, let's say, a paradigm shift of our society with, towards a better relationship to the environment. Do you think, I think you saw some of the talks, do you think architects are starting to take the right consequences from this? Was there anything that inspired you, or where you thought, this is an interesting idea? Or do you think they haven't really gotten the point yet?
No, I'm really surprised, and in a positive way, that many of those you spoke with already mentioned the topic of climate crisis. And I'm really glad to hear that we could inspire as well the BSA in Switzerland to make this the main topic next year. And I think
the Swiss Association of Architects, for our international viewers. Mm-hmm.
So this is.
I think the thoughts, or lots of people, the city cannot react that fast, and I think this you were talking a lot about the density, and of course in the beginning it seems that these are two different ideas. Now the less dense cities and the density for the sufficiency for the climate change. But we found out that we have to build the flexible structures for the future that can be changed, but still we cannot now build a Corona city. That's just not the idea. And I think all the ideas we have to put in, now the bigger problems that are coming up. And I think the Corona is more an idea, or it gives us an idea what will happen maybe. And everybody talked, or lots of people you talked about also that it's now the moment to act. That now we see inequalities. We have to think as a role, our role as architects anew. And I think this was the most important thing you were talking about, that we have to somehow discuss together how is our vision for the future. And I figured out that in, for example, the university, it's still, we look a lot back always what happened, and there's so much changes now that we really have to focus on the future that we don't know, and it's really hard to say what is coming. But I think we as architects have to get an idea what the future is, and I think we as architects should talk together and find out in groups, discussions of professionals how this future can look. And I think there were lots of, the spirit was there to change things or to rethink everything we have on our tables, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. The question also, it's difficult to reach the people, the architects who sit in the office and make the projects. You know, people who talk about architecture, a lot, people you talked to, they are quite aware of all the problems we have at the moment, and of Corona being part of it. And I think maybe our idea, or maybe our task now, is to reach every building architect, which is probably not listening tonight, but we somehow have to reach them to go and do that with us.
How are your experiences with more established architects? Is your group basically a funky gang of youngsters that tries to to hit it off really well and find a place also in the landscape of discourse? Or would you be interested in also getting experienced and more senior architects? I mean, if you approached Jacques Herzog, do you think he would become part of Countdown 2030?
I think everybody should. I think it's just a starting point to discuss. So please, Jacques Herzog, come here. We want to talk to everybody. I think really we should have this discussion on all occasions we could, and on prices in the newspapers, in the competitions, in what we are building. Just find out what is our way now to...
I mean, the best thing that could happen is if every Swiss or even world architect would be part of us, We want experienced architects to also start rethinking, because they're going to build also for the next 10 and 20 years still, and they also should change the way they build. But it's much easier for young people or young architects to kind of promote something like that, because we're not that much into the structures yet, into the existing structures. And it's always hard if you're in an existing structure and environment and you've been there for 10, 20 years and you know your way around, and then all of a sudden you should change. That's very difficult. You
mean you're not yet enough corrupted by habit?
Yes, exactly. Probably. Mm-hmm. By habit and money and whatever, right? Constraints.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think there are lots of older architects that came up to us and told us, "Hey, it's so great, it's so important what you're doing." Maybe also we found out that maybe they have little freedom doing things, changing things, having little time. Actually, it takes time to think about these topics. You have to do research and.
How much of your time do you dedicate to Countdown 2030 as opposed to your offices?
It's different. We have well, I can speak about myself. It's 5 to 10% of the daily week.
It's more at the moment maybe 1 day a week, something like that.
Maybe
since
sometimes even more. Sometimes I think it's 1 to 2 days even sometimes, and it's really different. But sometimes when you're working in the office and you do a design and then you think, wow, I have to do something for Countdown 2030, you think, this is really something for the future. I can do something that is really good, and maybe it's the most important project I'm right now working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe as we're approaching the end of our conversation, what are the next steps that you would like to take? What have you planned to do in the next couple of months or years?
Well, we started today with a newsletter, and we invite everybody to go on our homepage and subscribe for this newsletter. So there you can see and get informed about our topics and actions. And
maybe you just say the web address of Countdown 2030. What's it called?
It's countdown2030.ch.
Yeah, CH.
Yeah, .ch. You know, we've planned something that we wanted to do since the beginning, but it's taken a bit longer, is that we wanted to make 3 postcards on the scale of detailing to building to city, where we have like this very quick, you can look at them and you can see what you can implement or change within your architectural project right at the day you work on it. And we would like to promote them. And we have a lot of upcoming events where we can join other institutions and organize things with them. But yeah, there's different ones, so you probably better just check them out on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe it's important to say that the postcard, you should read it, you should be able to read it in 5 minutes, so everybody can sometime read it, and it's really fast, and you get to go back to your desk and you know what you should do now if you want to make or not make the biggest mistakes, I'd say, or you can, with creativity, do new concepts. And we're talking about these things in workshops, lectures, we have discussions where we are part of. Now we are invited to make an exhibition, and it's different things, and every week there's a new thing popping out, and yeah, so we don't know what happens in the next time, but yeah, you'll read in the newsletter about it.
All right.
And maybe something to mention is that so far it has been quite concentrated on Basel, but we want to change that also and go further within Switzerland, and then maybe even further. And our countdown, our physical countdown that you mentioned in the beginning, is now at the Domus House of BSA in Basel, and it's going to go to Hochparterre in Zurich soon. And we will also have an exhibition in Zurich in the start of next year. So we are going to continue to spread also.
All right. Well, thank you for your time to do this little conversation. I would like to say a couple of words about for our audience. Actually, this is the last talk of these Instagram live talks that we've been doing during the running time, the extra running time of our current show, Under the Radar, which we started when the museum had to close. It was an interesting experience, and many people told us they liked this format. We are thinking about continuing this in a different form, so to use this format and use it whenever we think this is appropriate, to maybe introduce an interesting architecture office that few people know, but maybe should be known much more. We don't know yet how we'll do this. Actually, our show that brought this baby to the world is coming to an end on this weekend. So if people still haven't seen it that are near to Basel, you can do that still tomorrow and on Saturday or on Sunday. Then the show will be dismounted and we'll start something new about actually the future of Basel, with a show called Basel 2050. It's a little bit similar to your title, and the idea is to think about, well, what will the city be in 30 years' time? And it's an interesting show because it's basically a show that only takes about 3 weeks. And in this 3 weeks, we feature actually a lot of debates, actually altogether 10 debates with the audience, and with various protagonists that shape the future of the city. And it will be an interesting format where the exhibition is more like a stage set with the aim to provide a stage for discourse. And yeah, so that's what we will be doing immediately in this coming future. I think it was interesting to hear all these architects talk about what they think Corona means for the city, for the way we build. And of course, it's just the beginning of a rethinking of our ways of acting. And yes, in that sense, I think we also will keep this format to a dialogue with our audience. If you have any suggestions, dear audience, send us a mail and let us know, for instance, how we should continue, what rhythm, what kind of topics, and so on. So thank you, Countdown 2030. Thank you, everyone out there who followed us so closely and with a lot of patience, even during our technological breakdowns, which happened often, but they were sometimes also the charm. And thank you to all the architects that gave their time and consideration to make this series of inquiries an interesting one. Okay, then bye-bye to you, bye-bye to everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.